Welcome to the Nobody Guide to Life, where we provide tips and tools for personal growth, personal development, and your spiritual journey that you can use right now in your everyday life. I'm J.A. Plosker. Thank you for joining us. We're glad to have you here. You can always find out more at nobodiesview.com or thenobodybible.com, or you can check us out at Twitter and Facebook at Nobody's View, or you can join our Facebook group, Simple Spirituality. If you like what you hear on the show, we'd welcome a subscription or a review. We'd appreciate it. So sometimes on the path of personal growth, we're required to take a different direction. We need to look at something in a new way. Maybe we take a class and that helps us learn a new skill like meditation or mindfulness. Or maybe we go to hear an inspirational talk because we want to see an issue or maybe our whole life in a new way. So my guest today might tell you that this path of personal and spiritual growth demands a little reinvention, a little exploration, and a little discovery. Dr. Sharon Stills is a naturopathic medical doctor. She's also a certified meditation teacher, lecturer, author, and a natural medicine consultant. And her belief that the key to genuine health and happiness is knowing that body and mind are one. She's helped thousands of women transition through life stages to experience greater health and happiness, and her red card deck helps people create their own path to health and peace. So I want to introduce Dr. Sharon Stills. Thank you for being here.
Wow, thank you for having me. I love that intro.
Oh, well, I'm glad. So it's inspired by you and all the wonderful things that you have going on. You have so much that you've done and so much going on. I think it would really be helpful to people to hear about what led you to that path of naturopathy. What is it about your own journey of spiritual and personal growth that took you in that direction?
Well, basically, if you think of the archetype as the wounded healer, I could definitely squeeze myself in there. I grew up very unhealthy and sick and in hospitals with severe asthma attack and allergies and overweight and depressed. And then as I entered my teens, addicted and headaches and depression and hormonal issues. And I just pretty much was like, I'm going to just cover it all and just get as ill as I can be. And no disrespect to my parents or the physicians who were helping me. They all were doing the best they could do, but they just weren't using alternative methods. They were just using antibiotics, allergy shots, and medications. And it just wasn't doing the trick. And I can't really pinpoint in an exact moment. I wasn't feeling well. Got pregnant. I got married early at 20 and I was pregnant and had my first son at 21 and was kind of worried, like, oh, I don't want my baby to suffer like I'm suffering. And across my path came a friend who was involved in nutrition. Her brother was a colon hydrotherapist, and she just kind of opened my eyes to this new way of healing the body. And sometimes when you just hear something that your soul recognizes as truth, you jump on board and you run with it. And that's what I did. And so I started healing myself and working on my son because I could see he was having similar issues as I was, and he was having eczema and all sorts of things that were indicative of that atopic personality where you have the allergies and the asthma and so forth. And so it just kind of came to me. I, was very grateful that I met someone who opened my mind and my eyes to a new way of being. And so now when I look back and I think I grew up walking distance was Carvel's, which I don't know if that's on the East Coast. It's an ice cream place. So full of dairy and sugar. And then,
I remember.
And then across the street was McDonald's. So,
right.
A typical day was going up and I was being healthy. I would get a fish fillet with a chocolate shake and,
right.
And some ice cream for dessert. And so I was just loading my body with sugar and dairy and gluten and things that I then learned didn't work in my body. And so I was able to cure myself of all these issues that were going on through diet, through supplements, through meditation. And it's been, this journey started when I was 21 and I just turned 50, and the journey still continues. It's always a process, but I've learned a lot along the way. And so in doing so, ended up giving back and becoming a physician so I could help others to be a guide. So they didn't, I struggled a lot. And when I started in on this, there was no internet. There was knowledge wasn't at our fingertips so readily like it is today. And so I really wanted to help others learn what I had learned and not struggle along the way to find out all that information.
Well, let me ask you a question. Let's go back a little because you just said something really interesting that I can totally relate to. I mean, I remember my freshman year of college knowing that I was really at the start of the publicly accessible internet. And you said that a friend introduced you to this. And I know for a lot of us on this path, personal growth, personal development, the spiritual journey, sometimes there's a lot of trepidations around beginnings, getting started. When this was brought to you, were you hesitant at all? Can you talk about what were you feeling when you were first introduced to these natural methods? What was going on in your thoughts when these things came to you and you were trying them out for the first time, you were exploring them for the first time?
I'm one of those people that I don't have a lot of cynicism or trepidation. If I hear it and it sounds like truth, I'm just like full steam ahead.
Right.
So I can, I know that sometimes you can hear these things and be a little cynical or go slow, and that's fine if that's the way you get involved and take in new information. For me personally, it made so much sense that there was no question. And because it worked, because what I was learning worked and I saw change, I think that'll, if you try something new and it doesn't work, it's easy to go, well, I don't know, maybe this is not the right path, maybe this is BS or whatever it is you think. But when you try something and it works, you're like, woohoo, give me more.
Well, what was one of those first things? Because there's always this moment. I think if a lot of us look back, we can find moments that were guides for us, that were indicators that our truth would produce a result. We sit down to meditate and we really do feel better, or we look at our anxiety with a compassionate mind instead of getting drawn into it, and we realize it lessens it a little. Early on for you, what were some of those early things that you tried and you realized, well, this is having a real and profound effect on me, and it was really changing the way you looked at things?
I think two things. I think the way I entered the natural healing world were really through two of the basics. And so obviously many years later, I've expanded into many other things, but it really was through diet and exercise.
Right.
And so exercising regularly, and this will date me. My friend and I had a cassette tape of Jane Fonda doing her aerobics, and and every day we would do that. We had the kids and we would settle them down with some toys and we would make sure we got that done. And then we would take a 45-minute walk every afternoon. And that did such wonders on my emotional state and my depression. And the diet piece was just, wow, to stop with the dairy and all of a sudden to not have nasal passages that I couldn't breathe through, to stop with the gluten and be able to breathe and not feel asthmatic. It was so dramatic. I think because I had just been filling my body with those foods that I was so reactive to, when I stopped, my body was just like a huge exhale on so many levels, physically, spiritually, just so many levels.
One of the big things that I noticed and you just brought something up that kind of brought it to mind, and we said it in the introduction. One of your truths is that the body and mind are one. And I really would like to hear a little bit about how that coalesced. So kind of building off what you've been talking about, because this is something that's really interesting to me. In your early days with this, what were those first signs that body and mind really were one? Can you talk about the emotions or the feelings around how you were treating your body? How did that change your internal state?
Well, I'll tell you a quick story, a personal story of because I think a lot of times it's our own personal experiences that lead us to be able to share with others. I feel like, if you can have the experience yourself and embody it, you can be a little bit of a better guide. Everyone obviously has different experiences, but it helps you be a little more empathetic. So I was 25. I was a single mom. I had a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old that I was raising on my own. I had just moved across the country to Arizona. I was doing my undergrad, like 30 credits a semester, very
Wow.
crazy.
Yeah. Wow.
So I could get into naturopathic medical school. I was massaging as a profession, so I had become a massage therapist. And I had these two little rugrats I was taking care of.
Right.
And they went off to their Montessori school and came home not too long after we had moved out there. It was probably like 3 or 4 months, and they had the chicken pox. And no big deal when a kid has a chicken pox. That's a good thing. It helps to build immunity, and the immune system. But I had never had the chicken pox. And for those of you that don't know, I hear you say, chicken pox as an adult is not a good thing.
Yeah.
And so I got the chicken pox. They had the chicken pox for like 12 hours, a few pocks, a few itches, and they were done.
Right.
And I went full steam ahead. If I'm going to do something, I'm going to go big or I'm going to go home. And so I had chicken pox everywhere. And for a month, I was dealing with chicken pox, and it was a serious case. And so there I was, just lying on the pull-out futon, because back in that day I had a 1-bedroom apartment and the kids were in the bedroom and I was on a pull-out futon in the living room. And so I was there for a month, itching and miserable. And from the chicken pox, I went into pneumonia.
Wow.
And I had pneumonia for about a month, and was seeing a naturopathic doctor at the time, and he was helping me out. And we used some really powerful herbs like lomatium, which is really helpful for pneumonia, and was doing all sorts of things and getting acupuncture and getting adjusted. And finally the pneumonia left. And then I went into chronic fatigue.
Wow.
And so now I'm on month number 3, and I'm just lying on this pull-out futon, and neighbors are pitching in and taking care of the kids, and I'm pretty much useless. I can't do anything. And it's like, all right, I'm eating the right diet, I'm taking the supplements, and I'm just lying here. And it was like a month into that, so, towards the end of month number 3, where I just had this epiphany that I wasn't happy with how my life was going, that here I had these children who were the most important thing to me, and I wasn't getting to spend a lot of time with them. They were off at school all day long. I was busy with school and then working at night, and it was just a very undesirable experience for me. And I started to think, how could I do this differently? How can I create a life that makes me happier? And so looking back at it now, I'm not sure how I did this, but I was young. But I decided I was going to homeschool my children so I could be with them all day.
Wow.
I was going to go to night school, so I had a friend who could watch them at night while I went and did night classes.
Right.
And I was going to stop massaging in a office that was a half-hour drive each way, and I was going to start massaging out of my house.
Wow.
So I could be home. And it's like I decided all this, and the next day it was like, boom, my energy was back. The fatigue was gone. I was no longer horizontal on the couch. I was ready to have a vertical life again. And I just made those changes. And it was such a powerful experience for me, because I realized right then and there the big connection between the mind and the body.
Right.
And it's not just about feeding the body properly. That's important, but it's also about being in tune with your deeper desires, with your passions, with your gratitude, with your happiness, with where your soul wants to reside and hang out.
So what do you attribute that to? Because I think that's something that a lot of people think about. We're hearing a lot now about mindfulness. We talk about that a lot on this podcast. What do you attribute those kinds of shifts to? When you make that kind of decision and then you see that the fruits of that decision are actually a successful shift, what do you attribute that to? Where do you think that comes from?
I think it comes from a very deep energetic place. So you could call it the soul. You can call it being in alignment, being in touch. I think it's really, I believe healing is energy, and it starts out in more of the energetic layers and comes into our physical body for the most part. And so it's hard. My body was tired because I wasn't doing what worked for me. And so my body was like, I'm just going to lie here and not participate until you figure it out.
Right.
I'm pretty happy I figured it out in a month. It could have, it could have been 5, 10 years. And there are people who, suffer with long-term chronic debilitating diseases. And so my work as a physician really shows me it's a combination, because you can't really disregard the physical body, because we are energetic beings in a physical body.
Right.
And so we have to nurture the vessel, our body. Yet we also have to nurture our spirit. And so that is why red is reinvent your health, referring to the physical body, explore your spirit, because the two are intertwined. And I find it's different for everyone. So sometimes, for example, I'll see a patient who has really bad headaches, let's just say, and it really is that they just needed to get a food sensitivity out of their diet, or they needed to optimize their B vitamin levels, because they're already kind of in their journey, their passion is going, they're living a fulfilled life. And so sometimes it can be just a tweak of a vitamin, of a nutrient change, of a lifestyle change, more upon the physical level. More often than not, it's more complicated than that. And it really is looking deeper at what's going on in the life spiritually, and where are you out of tune and not living your passions, your path.
Okay, so there's a lot there. So for our listeners who may not have any experience with naturopathy, or are just curious, how would that look for a person if they were at a crossroads and they wanted to have a naturopathic experience? How would that look in your office? How would that look in your practice?
Well, when you go see a naturopathic physician, it's a entirely different experience than seeing a traditional MD. From beginning to start, you're going to be with your naturopathic doctor a minimum of an hour on a first appointment.
Right.
Some doctors are an hour and a half, some are 2 hours, and you're really going to get to share your story. I mean, that's my opening line to a new patient is, tell me your story.
Right.
And tell it all, and don't think anything should be left out, because what may seem unimportant to you could be the key, the magic key to unlock your case and help you find healing.
Right.
And so naturopathic doctors, we have philosophies. So the doctor is the teacher. So I'm not on up some pedestal telling you what to do. I'm working with you, finding solutions that are going to work for you, that are realistic in your life. We look to do no harm, so the least invasive things we're going to do first. And one of my favorite is, we're really looking at the root cause.
Right.
So it's not walking in and saying, I have a headache, and just saying, okay, here's your prescription. That should get rid of your headache. It's saying, oh, you have a headache. Well, let's look at everything that makes up you to see what are the things that are contributing to your headache. It could be your sleep. It could be your diet. It could be your exercise habits or lack of exercise habits. It could be that you're running very high stress levels, or that there's toxicity you're exposed to at your workplace or your home place or in the yard where they're spraying pesticides. And so I always say I'm kind of like a 2-year-old when I'm talking to my patients, because I'm always like, why? And so, but, between being a 2-year-old and putting on my little Sherlock Holmes cap, that's how we start to figure out what's going on. And it really is a journey. And there's always another layer we can pull off.
It sounds like it could be a little overwhelming for a patient. It sounds like there's a lot of investigation taking place. We start a new practice of any kind. It forces us to confront certain things. So if we're starting a meditation practice or a mindfulness practice, maybe we're becoming very aware of anxiety, whereas before it was just the background. Sometimes confronting it can turn up that volume. What do you do? How do you handle that if somebody comes to you and it really does shine spotlights in certain areas or turn up volume in places they've never thought of in a while? Does that happen? What do you do when that happens?
That's a great insight and a great question. I think that we call it the art, the practice of medicine. And so I think that's where one of my gifts lies as a physician, where I can kind of take the information and start to disseminate where we need to go first. Is it really something going on physically? Because sometimes if we're having a real physical issue, like if you're having extreme headaches and you're not a seasoned meditator, it's not going to be always so easy to start teaching you to meditate when you're so distracted by the headache,
Right.
even though in meditation we would just sit with the headache. But that could be difficult to learn right off the bat.
Right.
And so I may say to someone, look, these are the kind of things that I think we need to address, and we're going to kind of do them in this order. And I also check with the patient because we're all different. Some patients, like they're just gangbusters. I want to do everything now. That's how I make change. I make changes in one sweeping motion. So I'm going to just go for it. And other patients, more commonly, not so much. I like to think of things, I use the term kaizen. And so it's a Japanese term, and it's the way we make change very slowly.
Right.
So slow steps are steps that last. Those patients that want to change everything at once, if they really know themselves and know how they are, that could work for them. But more often than not, I feel like we need to prioritize the changes or the new things we're going to institute, the things we're going to take away, or the things we're going to add. And then we kind of have a roadmap, a journey of how we're going to accomplish that.
See, I think that's so important. I mean, look, whether or not a person visits a naturopathic physician, whether whatever your feelings on any of that, a really key point is this idea of looking at the situation as a whole and coming up with a plan. And I think one of the big things when we talk about personal growth, spirituality, it helps to have a plan. It's fun to explore. It really is. That's one of the beautiful things about this path. It's open to everybody. But sometimes it's nice when you get to a national park or something. The first place you stop is at the visitor center, and you get
Right.
oriented to it, and they give you a map, and they say, well, the trees are changing here, and there's been animals spotted here. And you can decide how you want that journey to look. There's time to see the animals, there's time to see the trees, but you can decide what you want to visit first. So I think that takeaway from that is that's really nice to hear about coming up with a plan. I mean, is that something that you tailor to every patient? Do you do that with every patient? You kind of calm them, and say, let's make this plan?
Absolutely. And just to take, for those listening, like I often say this, and it's something that, like you said, whether you see a naturopath or not, but something you can institute is, I really believe cultivating health, you need to be organized. You need to have a plan. So let's just take exercise, for example. So everyone wants to exercise. Everyone has good intentions. But those of you that don't get to it because you're too busy or you're too tired or whatever the I'll call it an excuse is, and I don't mean that to shame you, but whatever it is you come up with, the reason that you can't do it can be overcome by planning. So one of my greatest tools for my patients is a calendar.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, let's talk about exercise. What's realistic for you? It's not realistic that everyone's going to hit the gym 7 days a week.
Right.
But is it realistic you can hit the gym 4 days a week? Well, not really. Well, let's look at your schedule and see why it isn't. And let's start scheduling that in a time that's going to work for you.
Right.
And now it becomes a non-negotiable. And so that's how we start to get healthy. A lot of it is practicality and planning.
Right.
Otherwise, we just don't get to the gym and we don't get the benefits from exercising, or we don't meal plan and cook ahead. And so when we're rushing out the door, we don't have anything healthy that we could pack up and take with us. So we're stopping at Dunkin' Donuts or grabbing a Starbucks or whatever it is. And so planning is, so yes, as a physician, I help the patient with a grand plan. And then as a patient, as a human being, we need to plan accordingly for what are the important things for us. So when I was going to medical school and I was a single mom and busy raising 2 kids, and in medical school, I had like my non-negotiables. And I think they could be a little different for everyone, but for me, it was getting 8 hours sleep.
Right.
It was getting in a little aerobic exercise, and it was meditating. Right. And so I scored. I lived around the corner from a Zen monk. you know, sometimes we can create really fabulous things. And so he would do this meditation at like 4:30 in the morning. We'd chant and we'd sit. And so I would go over there. My kids were old enough. I could sneak out, be around the corner while they were still sleeping. And I wouldn't be able to stay for all the meditation, but I was able to do the chanting in the first sit. And so I would get my meditation in, but I was getting up at 4:30 in the morning. So what did that mean? It meant, you know, I was going to bed at 8:30 because that was a non-negotiable for me. And so I was really planning. And when I got back from my meditation, I was able to sneak in a half hour on the elliptical at the machine. And so it was enough in a very busy period in my life to still get my non-negotiables to keep the foundation of my health moving forward. But it meant I didn't stay up late. And so it meant sacrificing some things that maybe I wouldn't have. So if I wasn't strict on getting to bed on time, I would have been walking around tired, or I wouldn't have been able to get up in the morning because I'd be tired. And so I would have ended up skipping the meditation or skipping the exercise. And so it's about prioritizing. And I think when you really see, like we talked about before, when you see that things are working, you start to value them more.
Right. And one of the things we talk about a lot, and I can just hear it, you know, in what you're saying is so important, is, you know, one of the big nobody principles that we always talk about is the things you need for personal growth, spiritual growth, personal development. They're right in your everyday life. So you don't have to climb the highest mountain or swim the seas. You can wake up in the morning and fit in a few minutes of meditation. So if you wake up 5 minutes earlier, or, you know, maybe you displace one thing so you can cook that meal. So the things you need are there, but sometimes it's about shifting. And that brings me to the question about your deck. So this idea of shifting of cards, of shuffling cards around, talk to me about how does all of this work into this red deck that you've talked about? What is that?
Well, the red deck is 39 tips on how to reinvent your health, how to explore your spirit, and how to discover your sexy. And so sexy, we hear sexy, we think sexy, slinky dress and high heels and let's go have sex. And, you know, that is part of sexy. But I think the word sexy to me has a much larger definition. And you know, what is it that really you see in someone and think they're sexy? It's they're in their body, they're on their journey, they're in their life, they're in their passions, and that really exudes sexiness. And so these are tips that I discovered after 10 years in clinical practice that kind of just across the board work for everyone, and that it's individualized. So you may need more focus on getting the sleep down and the diet down, the exercise down, because maybe you're really focused on meditation and spirituality, or maybe it's the opposite. You're really, you know, you eat this clean diet and you're a gym rat and you sleep and you value all these things, but you don't really take time to meditate or be grateful or have a meditation practice or explore where you're carrying anger or things of that nature. And so these are the things that I felt like I could give to the general population, whether they became a patient or not, because obviously there's only so many hours and so many days in the week, and I can't be everyone's doctor. And so, but I wanted to give these tips and tools that could really help shift things, whether you're dealing with something like an allergy or a headache, not so life-threatening, or you're dealing with end-stage cancer, which is a lot of what I do with my private practice, dealing with patients who have chronic autoimmune disease or who are dealing with cancer.
Right. So how would you work that deck? How would that look for a person? How would you use it?
Well, the deck is a lot of fun, and it even comes with a card telling you how to use it, which basically says use it any way you want.
I love that.
because you know, like I said, so there's R, E, and D. Right now, I'm in the process of creating some more cards, but right now there's 13 in each. And so you could go through a card at a time and for a week, for a month, for a year, for whatever you need. And you could do them in order, or you could just shuffle. A lot of people, myself included, will have a deck and every morning shuffle, and it's kind of like a naturopathic tarot deck,
Right.
and you and you
Right.
and you pick your card, and it's just so interesting how the universe works and the law of attraction. And everyone, one of the things I always hear feedback is, oh my God, I picked the card. It's like you were talking to me. You knew exactly what was going on in my life. And so, you could just pick a card every morning. You can pick one from R, one from E, one from D. And I really made them that they're so diverse. And so you may look at some and go, yeah, like the exercise card. I'm really good with my exercise. I've got this covered. I don't really
Right.
need to focus on this card. And then you may look at another card and, talking about getting out of your head and into your body and
Right.
feeling centered and really learning how to connect. And, sometimes when we're on a real spiritual journey, sometimes we're like ungrounded and we need to kind of have some tools, whether it be like earthing or even just visualizing yourself in the middle of a tornado and just standing there and being able to be calm in the
Right.
midst. And so you may say, oh, wow, that really works for me. That I really need that resonates for me. And maybe that's a card you sit with for a year or an hour,
Right.
because we all integrate and process at different times. And so the cards have a quote from me, they have a little bit of information, and then they have some takeaway tips. And my feeling was like, out of 39 cards and 3 or 4 tips on each card, and that's I don't know, 160 tips or so. Like, even if just one thing had a positive impact in your life,
Yes.
then like I've contributed and I've helped you on your journey. And so it might be something as simple as learning to take your shoes off when you walk in the house so you don't track pesticides from the outside through your house.
Right.
So it helps you to detox. Or it might be learning to take a deep breath and calm down before you react to someone. Or maybe it's learning to be more in touch with your senses and become present when you're taking a shower and really feeling the water. And so they're so varied, but healing comes in so many different sizes, shapes, and forms. It's not just the vitamins we take or the food
Right.
we eat, although those are cornerstones. There's so much more to healing. And so that's what the red deck is really about.
Well, I love that. And I think you've answered our big question on the show 100 times already. You've given us so much, but what's a tip or tool from your experience that has really, really helped you? What's something that our listeners can use right now, right when this episode is over, that can help them on their spiritual journey or their personal growth journey?
Well, I'll give you one from R and one from E.
Okay. Sounds good.
and one from D. How's
That
that?
sounds great.
So the R one, and I'm here in Phoenix and it's summer, so I'm going to have it be hydration.
Yeah.
And so making sure you're hydrated, and this is something that I talk about a lot, but it's especially appropriate now because it's so hot out. But treating hydration as a full-time job and not being too busy to hydrate yourself. And we are 70-80% water, and water is a necessity for us. And if you wouldn't not water your plants, you see what happens
Right.
to them. They shrivel up and die.
Right.
And so when you don't water yourself, you might not see it so much on the outside, but on the inside, your cells are shriveling up and dying, and you're not getting the nutrients in, and your lymph is not moving. And it can really be the cause of a lot of disturbances, whether it be fatigue, headaches, muscle pain, asthma, joint pain, constipation, on and on and on. So before you even reach to like take vitamins or do things that are going to influence your physical health, get your body properly hydrated, and then see what you're left with. Because you may go, holy moly, I'm now drinking enough water and I don't need to see the acupuncturist for headaches because I don't have headaches anymore.
Interesting.
And, and rule of thumb would be half your weight in ounces. So if you are a 200-pound person, you would drink 100 ounces. If you're a 100-pound person, you would drink 50 ounces. And that's a minimum of a day. If you can really get up to the 99-ounce, like 3-liter mark,
Right.
That's like the magic, turns on metabolism and just really, really makes things happen.
Interesting.
So that would be an easy tip that you can all do.
Yeah.
And then let's see, I just picked a e-card, just so not knowing what you guys would want to hear, but the one I came up with was to harness the power of your thoughts. And so it's one I really believe in. If you want to know what you're thinking, look at the life you're living.
Yeah. Yes.
And so the power of our thoughts is just immense. And so what we focus on truly does expand, and we do have this powerful mind that we can use to manifest. So look at the thoughts you're thinking. And a take-home tip would be, if you don't already do it, start a gratitude journal.
Yes. Yes.
Three things a day you're grateful for, and turning around how you're seeing things. So you can view things from a negative point of view, or you can view it from an optimistic point of view. And that's not to say that everything needs to be roses,
right.
Because there's a reality. And I think a lot of people who have gotten into a more of a new agey way of thinking just want to smile their way through their pain.
Right.
And I think our pain needs to be acknowledged,
right.
but it doesn't need to be dwelled on. And we can always find, a sparkle, a rainbow in everything. So I would say start looking at what you're thinking.
Right. Excellent. Thank you.
And then for D, for discovering, I just pulled create a vision that guides you every day. Breathe life into your visions because they're the whisperings of your soul, which kind of goes back to that first question you asked. It really is about pausing, being still and listening to the whisperings of your soul. And so what lights you up? And this may sound weird, but I often look at who do I become envious of? Who am I looking at going, wow, that life they're living, that's great.
Yeah.
I want that. And when I see that in my life, then I go, okay, well, I can have that too. So how am I going to get there? And I'm a big fan of vision boards. I think cutting things out, pictures, words,
right.
pasting them up where you can see them is a good reminder. You see it every day, and it kind of just reminds you, because it's very easy to forget the whisperings of our soul or our grandest vision if we're just in our daily life going through the daily motions. So we need some tools, whether it be a vision board or I have rocks by my sink that have nice sayings on
right.
them, or a picture, a magnet on whatever it is that's going to just remind you. Maybe it's a red card that you
right.
have sitting on your bedstand. but creating the vision and not giving up on your vision. We are all so powerful, and we are here to live the life we deserve, and we can create that. So never give up on your vision. There's always a way to attain it.
Well, I think that is a beautiful note to bring us to the end of this episode of the Nobody Guide to Life. Thank you so much, Dr. Stills, for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I want to remind our listeners to embrace your inner reinventor, your inner explorer. Challenge yourself to see life in a new way. A little more freedom and a little more insight into ourselves and others. That's a really powerful reward on this path of personal and spiritual growth. So thank you again, Dr. Stills. You can find out more about her at yourredlife.com or drstills.com. That's drstills, STILLS.com. And the links will be in our show notes at nobodiesview.com. And remember, you can always find out more about what we're doing at nobodiesview.com or the nobodybible.com. Or you can reach out to us on Twitter and Facebook at Nobody's View, or join the Facebook community Simple Spirituality. If you like what you hear on this podcast, please consider a review or a subscription. We'd really appreciate it. Keep practicing and have a good week.